Hi, welcome to Northwest Tech Show. I'm Dave Duncan, joined today by Nate Darnell. How's it going, Nate?
Hey, this is Nate. Can you hear me now? Can you hear
I
me
hear
now?
you great. Yes, you are the Sprint guy. Well, sir. Another beautiful week in technology. All sorts of strange things afoot.
All kinds of strange things afoot. Talk to me about those.
Well, one was that the Mt. Gox login mysteriously reappeared. No explanation.
Wasn't it shut down?
Yeah, they declared bankruptcy and such. So it's theoretically you can log in and check your balances, but here's the thing: their database got leaked. So anybody could set up a thing that you log in and check your balance on. I saw this thing, and when I saw that link, the first thing I went to was the comments on the story, because I just wanted to. I'd rather see other people's experience with logging in rather than throw my own credentials out there, because should Mt. Gox ever come back in any meaningful way, it'd be a pretty good idea to have control of your credentials and not have that out there so someone else can loot your account. So that's Mt. Gox's job. So we wouldn't want to infringe on that. So there was that going on. Another thing was, and this was kind of fun, I follow a lot of the thinking of Cory Doctorow, who is a sci-fi author in one way, civil libertarian in another. He was formerly part of the EFF, and he was notably an author who believed in putting his stuff out there Creative Commons style, so that it was free to download. It's like you can download it free for personal use, or you can go buy my book. And he was operating on the principle that the biggest obstacle to a new author is obscurity, not piracy. So that's how he did it, and it went well. He developed a loyal following who buy his stuff, and he's been able to make a career out of this. So, and won quite a few awards for his books as well, like Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom, and I'm particularly fond of Little Brother, which was a young adult novel about growing up in a San Francisco where, due to a bomb going off, Homeland Security had pretty much declared martial law. So, good stuff. I recommend checking it out if you can on the web. It's you can download it for free. So, excellent stuff to see. But in particular, what I'm a fan of is his ability to really put succinctly in really understandable terms. So, great communicator here as well as a good thinker. What these different tech topics mean and how to think about things. So, this last week, I heard something that was kind of a new spin for me. And a lot of times we talk about security like it's engineering. You build a better wall and, a firewall, right? And, keeps bad guys out, right?
Right.
Well, he did an article, and he did a reading from the article that was about thinking about security like healthcare, that it's a healthcare issue for our civil lives, really. So I have a little 10-minute segment of Cory Doctorow reading his own article. He's talking about the GCHQ as well as NSA, which is GCHQ is the United Kingdom version of the NSA, and that's where he's currently living. He's from Canada, and he's lived in the U.S., and he's lived in England, where he currently resides. So this piece is from his podcast, which is Creative Commonsly licensed, non-commercial attribution share alike. So attribution, this is Cory Doctorow stuff. You Google the Cory Doctorow podcast, and you will find the location, which has a somewhat scurrilous first four letters and then hound. And check out more of his stuff. So anyway, without further ado, here's Cory Doctorow.
If GCHQ wants to improve national security, it must fix our technology. In a recent column, security expert Bruce Schneier proposed breaking up the NSA, handing its offensive capabilities work to U.S. Cyber Command and its law enforcement work to the FBI, and terminating its program of attacking Internet security. In place of this, Schneier proposed that Instead of working to deliberately weaken security for everyone, the NSA should work to improve security for everyone. This is a profoundly good idea for reasons that may not be obvious at first blush. People who worry about security and freedom on the internet have long struggled with the problem of communicating the urgent stakes to the wider public. We speak in jargon that's a jumble of mixed metaphors: viruses, malware, Trojans, 0 days, exploits, vulnerabilities, rats, that are the striated fossil remains of successive efforts to come to grips with the issue. When we do manage to make people alarmed about the stakes, we have very little comfort to offer them, because internet security isn't something that individuals can solve. I remember well the day this all hit home for me. It was nearly exactly a year ago, and I was out on tour with my novel Homeland, which tells a story of a group of young people who come into possession of a large trove of government leaks that detail a series of illegal programs through which their supposedly democratic governments spy on people by compromising their computers. I kicked off the tour at the gorgeous, daring Seattle Public Library main branch in a high-tech auditorium to an audience of 21st century dwellers in one of the technology revolution's hotspots, home of Microsoft and Starbucks. An unsung technology story. The coffee chain is basically an IT shop that uses technology to manage and deploy coffee around the world. I explained the book's premise, and then talked about how this stuff works in the real world. I laid out a parade of awfuls, including a demonstrated attack that hijacked implanted defibrillators from 10 meters distance and caused them to compromise other defibrillators that came into range, implanting an instruction to deliver lethal shocks at a certain time in the future. I talked about Cassidy Wolf, the reigning Miss Teen USA, whose computer had been taken over by a sextortionist who captured nude photos of her and then threatened to release them if she didn't perform live sex shows for him. I talked about the future of self-driving cars, smart buildings, implanted hearing aids, and robotic limbs, and explained that the world is made out of computers that we put our bodies into, and that we put inside of our bodies. These computers are badly secured. What's more, governments and their intelligence agencies are actively working to undermine the security of our computers and networks. This was before the Snowden revelations, but we already knew that governments were buying 0-day vulnerabilities from security researchers. These are critical bugs that can be leveraged to compromise entire systems. Until recently, the normal response to the discovery of one of these vulns was to report them to the vendor so they could be repaired. But spy agencies and law enforcement have created a bustling marketplace for 0 days, which are weaponized for the purpose of attacking the computers and networks of bad guys. The incentives have shifted, and now a newly discovered bug has a good chance of remaining unpatched and live in the field because governments wanted to be able to use it to hack their enemies. Scientists formulate theories that they attempt to prove through experiments that are reviewed by peers who attempt to spot flaws in the reasoning and methodology. Scientific theories are in a state of continuous, tumultuous improvement as old ideas are overturned in part or whole and replaced with new ones. Security is science on meth. There is a bedrock of security that is considered relatively stable, the mathematics of scrambling and descrambling messages, but everything above that bedrock has all the stability of a half-set custard. That is, the best way to use those stable, well-validated algorithms is mostly up for grabs as the complex interplay of incompatible systems, human error, legacy systems, regulations, laziness, recklessness, naivete, adversarial cunning, and perverse commercial incentives all jumble together in ways that open the American retailer Target to the loss of 100 million credit card numbers and the whole internet to GCHQ spying. As Schneier says, anyone can design a security system that works so well that he can't figure out a way to break it. That is to say, your best effort at security is, by definition, only secure against people who are at least as dumb as you are. Unless you happen to be the smartest person in the world, you need to subject your security system to the kind of scrutiny that scientists use to validate their theories, and be prepared to incrementally patch and refactor things as new errors are discovered and reported. Hence, security is a process, not a product, another useful Schneierism. This is a distinction that sets security engineering apart from other engineering disciplines. Other kinds of engineers exist in a changing world, but security's change is of a different sort altogether. For example, structural engineering is a field under continuous improvement, and tomorrow's structural engineers will be able to apply better techniques to their work. But no one worries that someone will invent a way of making skyscrapers collapse tomorrow through application of an easily automated low-cost technique. The difference is that security engineering is an adversarial discipline. A structural engineer must contend with the forces of entropy and gravity, of harsh winds and rising seas. But a security engineer must contend with enemy security engineers who labor every hour of every day to find flaws in her work and use those flaws to covertly undermine it. I think there's a good case for security engineering not being engineering at all. Engineers try to erect and maintain infrastructure against threats that are indifferent to them. These threats may be powerful, floods in the Philippines, earthquakes in Haiti, but they aren't deliberate. The world doesn't have a will. It doesn't care if the earth shakes or not. But security adversaries want to break security. They lack the relentless force of physics, but exert something totally non-physical. Cunning. If security isn't engineering, what is it? I think there's a good case to be made for security as an exercise in public health. It sounds weird at first, but the parallels are fascinating and deep and instructive. Last year, when I finished that talk in Seattle, a talk about all the ways that insecure computers put us at risk, a woman in the audience put her hand up and said, "Well, you've scared the hell out of me. Now what do I do? How do I make my computers secure?" And I had to answer, you can't. No one of us can. I was a systems administrator 15 years ago. That means I'm barely qualified to plug in a Wi-Fi router today. I can't make my devices secure, and neither can you. Not when our governments are buying up information about flaws in our computers and weaponizing them as part of their crime-fighting and anti-terrorism strategies. Not when it is illegal to tell people if there are flaws in their computers, where such a disclosure might compromise someone else's anti-copying strategy. But if I had just stood here and spent an hour telling you about waterborne parasites, if I had told you about how inadequate water treatment would put you and everyone you love at risk of horrifying illness and terrible, painful death, if I had explained that our very civilization was at risk because the intelligence services were pursuing a strategy of keeping information about pathogens secret so they can weaponize them, knowing that no one is working on a cure, you would not ask me, how can I purify the water coming out of my tap? Because when it comes to public health, individual action only gets you so far. It doesn't matter how good your water is. If your neighbor's water gives him cholera, there's a good chance you'll get cholera too. And even if you stay healthy, you're not going to have a very good time of it when everyone else in your country is stricken and is taken to their beds. If you discovered that your government was hoarding information about waterborne parasites instead of trying to eradicate them, if you discovered that they were way more interested in weaponizing typhus than they were in curing it, you would demand that your government treat your water supply with the gravitas and seriousness that it is due. The public health analogy is surprisingly apt here. The public health threat model is in a state of continuous flux because our well-being is under continuous deliberate attack from pathogens for whom we are at best host organisms and at worst, dinner. Evolution drives these organisms to a continuously shifting array of tactics to slide past our defenses. Public health isn't just about pathogens either. Its thorniest problems are about human behavior and social policy. HIV is a blood-borne disease, but disrupting its spread requires changes to our attitudes about sex, pharmaceutical patents, drugs policy, and harm minimization. Almost everything interesting about HIV is too big to fit on a microscope slide. And so it is for security. Crypto is awesome maths, but it's just maths. Security requires good password choice, good password management, good laws about compelled crypto disclosure, transparency into corporate security practices, and, of course, an end to the government practice of spending $250 million a year on anti-security sabotage through the NSA and GCHQ programs Bull Run and Edgehill. But for me, the most important parallel between public health and internet security is their significance to our societal well-being. Everything we do today involves the internet, and everything we do tomorrow will require the internet. If you live near a nuclear power plant, fly in airplanes, ride in cars or trains, have an implanted pacemaker, keep money in the bank, or carry a phone, your safety and well-being depend on a robust, evolving practice of network security. This is the most alarming part of the Snowden revelations. Not just that spies are spying on us all, that they are actively sabotaging all of our technical infrastructure to ensure that they can continue to spy on us. There is no way to weaken security in a way that makes it possible to spy on bad guys without making all of us vulnerable to bad guys too. The goal of national security is totally incompatible with the tactic of weakening the nation's information security. Virus has been a term of art in the security world for decades, and with good reason. It's a term that resonates with people, even people with only a cursory grasp of technology. As we strive to make the public and our elected representatives understand what's at stake, let's expand that pathogen epidemiology metaphor. We never allow MI5 to suppress information on curing typhus so they could attack terrorists by infecting them with it. We need to stop allowing the NSA and GCHQ to suppress information on fixing bugs in our computers, phones, cars, houses, planes, and bodies. If GCHQ wants to improve the national security of the United Kingdom, if the NSA wants to improve the American national security, then they should be fixing our technology, not breaking it. The technology of Britons and Americans is under continuous deadly attack from criminals, from foreign spies, and from creeps. Our security is better served by armoring us against those threats than it is by undermining security so that cops and spies have an easier time attacking bad guys. All right, then. That's it for this week. Looks like I'll be around for a couple of weeks.
All right. Thank you, Cory Doctorow. So, yeah, quite a powerful presentation there.
That was pretty profound and also very disheartening.
Well, only in the sense that it makes what the current practice is so starkly bad, but often that is the gateway to making things better. And I would imagine that being that he gave this talk in the UK where they have a good public health system and, value that and they're proud of it, I would think that analogy would be even more powerful than it is here. All right. So we were talking about the overall spy environment that has been reigning over things. And I just add to that another program called Mystic, which was apparently the capability to monitor 100% of the phone calls in a undisclosed foreign country, to record them and keep them on tap, readily searchable for a month. And they're looking to add more countries to that. They just sort of give you, well, here's the number that we're going for, but we're not going to tell you which countries they are, of course. And just doing that to one country is enough to kind of put them all on notice, right?
Yeah, that's isn't that what that big Utah facility is doing in the United States, though?
Yeah. We have more storage capacity than anyone else, so we can implement these kind of things with a greater ease than any other country. So I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing. And on a related note, internet governance is continuing to take steps to get away from the U.S. And the U.S. it's sort of an amicable separation. The U.S. set some standards for, what they would find acceptable principles for, whatever future governance is done, which were good terms. They were kind of neutral terms. And basically, because, now we want to make sure that no one else leverages their control over the internet the way we did. If we don't control it, then it's going to be, it's got to be handled very neutrally. So in that case, their self-interest aligns with doing the right thing.
Now, this was ICANN.
Yeah.
That was essentially given to a global community.
Yeah.
Instead of being owned and managed solely by the United States.
Well, it had a unique relationship to the United States. So, it was like there was one set of rules for everyone else, and then there was another set of rules for the United States as the ones who kind of franchised it and started that process of handing it off to a civilian body. So, yeah, there's that. Now, speaking of that was for me kind of a mind-blowing thing, saying, okay, security is healthcare. So I don't know, what does that, as the new health radio guy, what does that suggest to you? Prevention, right? You know, you want to get more into prevention than chronic treatment, which is kind of it does work on both levels. Chronic treatment is kind of the model we have right now. We chase after things with virus scanners instead of designing things to be more secure.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And of course, my gears are turning as you're asking me that question. And one of the criticisms that I always had of modern software was that I saw two camps. I saw the software that was designed by engineers, like genuine engineers, like they thought like engineers, and they expected the machine to perform like it was made by engineers.
Yeah.
BSD, Unix, the original versions of Linux. These were all designed to run reliably and consistently. They weren't always the easiest for an end user to operate with, but the fundamental base concept was fault tolerance and reliability.
Right.
And what I saw with a lot of Microsoft products was a different kind of thought process, which was predominantly market and sell it first and fix it later, to ensure that we're meeting the sales quotas for the next market window.
Yeah.
And
my personal nitpick with that was, in sympathy with that actually, was things, because the consumer was ignorant of what true value was, the sales seemed to be based on, okay, how can we develop the longest feature list? A lot of times some of those features were counterproductive, like, hey, and we've got a scripting language in our word processor, which makes it horribly vulnerable to all sorts of malicious viruses and no really good uses. So, yeah.
Right. Which is kind of like chasing bells and whistles and shiny objects.
Yeah.
You know, does it really offer a benefit, or is it simply a new thing that's being pushed and promoted as something that's novel and offers you value? Does it really? Or is that just another marketing gimmick? And again, you see this with cars all the time. Do they change cars all the time because they really have to? Or is there a built-in
business model? Yeah.
It's the business model. And that was started in the automobile industry decades ago, almost 100 years ago, which was keep the consumer dissatisfied. So they always have to move to something new, and that will facilitate more product sales. Now, I'm not entirely opposed to this business model, because if you're not making product sales, you're not generating revenue, and how are you going to run a company? The challenge that I think about is when you're developing software and then it's your goal to place it in critical infrastructure like hospitals, the government, the U.S. military, my preference would be to design it with a solid engineering base first, like Unix, BSD, so that it's designed to be reliable and, for the most part, very unhackable, even though even the best systems have their weak links. In my opinion, Microsoft Windows was always a very superficial consumer-grade operating system that, for business purposes, was crammed into critical infrastructure. And it was never designed to be truly fault-tolerant. It was never designed as a critical infrastructure operating system. And this is one of the challenges that we face now. And because of their drive to push and develop dominance without an industry-style operating, or I guess an industrial operating system is what I would think that we would need. Now you have millions upon millions upon millions of devices that are in U.S. government, educational systems, hospital systems, households that are vulnerable to all kinds of attack because, again, they were designed from the standpoint of selling cool features to customers as opposed to developing solid and safe systems. Now
you have to include cell phones in that.
And now you have to include cell phones. Now, something else that I used to create a real distinction between was software patches, software updates, and value-added features. And I always found this really curious in that in the old days when software was developed, or updates were issued when a piece of software wasn't technically written wrong, but say, for instance, you had a program that created form letters with addresses, it had a limited number of addresses, and you had
And then they go to a new zip code system,
then
and it's like, okay, we need to do an update to accommodate that.
exactly. So then you have an update which will, change and create more zip codes for that software. Again,
Or old GPS systems, things like that.
it was never written wrong. It's just now things have changed. Then you have patches. Patches are when the software has genuine errors in it, and you need to correct it while it's already out in the field. Then you have value-added features. And these are like new buttons and new things, which
Now we'll export in a new format. Yeah.
exactly. And what I always found curious was that buttons for patches on operating systems didn't say, install the new patch, especially on Microsoft products. It didn't say, click this button to repair all the stuff that we didn't write correctly and sold it to you half-baked so that you can correct it now.
It doesn't sound so great when you put it that way, Nate.
That's exactly right, but that's the truth. And then what they would do is they would obscure that, with something like update, and they would, essentially publicly promote, oh, click this update so we can add value-added features to your operating system. Behind the scenes, they're correcting all these mistakes. And that helps to put a more polished public image on the product, so that they don't get caught with their pants down.
Most notably, just recently, the fix of the go-to fail bug in SSL on Macs and iOS devices, and in the description, it's something like improves SSL validation or something like that.
Right.
It's like re-enables SSL, which was completely broken. It should be a little bit more to the point.
Right. But this is happening also with modern day automobiles, which is, since all of them are now electronically controlled, and I've worked in these environments on the tech side. The cars are being sold now first, and then when you go in for your oil change, and this is one of the reasons why, if you'll notice now, there are fewer and fewer independent repair shops, and many manufacturers are essentially demanding that their automobiles be repaired and serviced at the factory or at a factory dealership.
Really?
Oh, yes. And so this does two things. Number one, they make everything proprietary so no one else can service it.
Right.
That way it becomes another revenue stream for the manufacturer, but also because there's a lot of software that has to be updated and corrected.
Oh, and then they get to sneak it in.
Yes, and so while you're having your oil changed, what they will do is, behind closed doors, they'll plug in the adapter, and then, say, for instance, Germany will communicate with headquarters back in Germany, and then Germany will push the new software update to correct some of the issues that have been happening.
Right.
And so it's all very interesting. The average consumer is completely oblivious to most of these things. They just think they're getting a great deal on an oil change. They don't realize what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So
I wish it should be law that there is a little bit of disclosure when they do these updates, because this is your intimate stuff that you use every day.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
in your life, and a lot of times these updates will include some rollbacks. They'll take away features because they change their business model and decide they now want to rent you what you had bought outright previously, or someone sued them, usually some patent troll, over something ridiculous, or a protectivist industry. Like I had a little MP3 player that had part of the ability. It also had an FM radio in it. One of the features on the thing was you could record from the FM stream. And that was a feature on the box. That was actually written on the cover when you go to buy it. And one of the updates just quietly took that feature back. It's like disables recording. They didn't mention that, though, in their updates. Or when I did a Streambox update, and I was being very careful. I did not want to do any updates that would break its compatibility with an open source receiver so that I could roll my own video link, because I was wanting to use it for remote live video links several years ago when this was really difficult to do. And I thought, oh, well, here's this hardware system. It's already got automatic restoration of the video link. It's already got automatic quality level adjustments. This thing's beautiful for what I want to do. All I need to do is roll my own receiver part to it. And so before I even applied that update, the first update after I got the thing, I looked around and saw, does this, I was looking for complaints, because usually there's a lot of noise like, yeah, this fix takes away features X, Y, and Z. So I looked for that and I didn't find it. Went ahead and applied the patch. And then the next day, the analysis came out saying, oh, that patch was pretty new, and this is what it did. One of the things it did was it encrypted it so it would break its compatibility with all these third-party products. I was just like, you just destroyed what I bought the thing for,
Right.
completely, because, I as a mere civilian is assumed not to be able to be trusted with the ability to communicate video from point A to point B. Even when in this case it was to do my own video, but they're like, we only want you to be, we're concerned that someone will use this to stream their TV from home and then record the output as opposed to just watch it live like you're supposed to.
Right.
With the acceptable proprietary receiver.
So to loop this back around to the connection between the tech industry and healthcare, what I see are some really striking commonalities. And
mercenary business models.
Well,
that hurt the end user.
I mean, you could, if you wanted to go to that extent, make that argument. But what I see more strikingly is the push to adopt synthetic pharmaceutical medications and to coax people into taking them. Then they have side effects, which then require patches with more synthetic pharmaceutical medications. And before long, you have someone that started out on a cholesterol medication and now they're taking 16 other drugs by the time they're in their early 60s.
Well, I'd say the correlation there would be going from maybe a simple solution to one that's proprietary that you can monetize.
That's right. And it creates many other codependencies, which again create more revenue streams.
Yeah.
And
Xbox that can't operate without phoning home or something.
That's right. And again, the parallel in this is, you cannot achieve optimal health through disease treatment. You can only achieve optimal health
because you have to wait till you're sick for that to work.
That's right. You can only achieve optimal health through disease prevention. And again, my experience with Western healthcare, well, I would say not Western healthcare, but with synthetic pharmaceutical medication manufacturers, multi-billion-dollar multinational corporations, they tend to want to keep society in a really sweet spot, somewhere between sort of healthy and kind of dead. And that's because if you're too healthy, then they can't sell you anything. If you're dead, they can't sell you anything either. So they want to keep you somewhere in the middle there, kind of like in a state of low-level chronic pain, so they can sell you stuff to suppress it and keep you dependent. And it's a fantastic business model. It's the most profitable business model in the world. It's just morally repugnant. So
as long as you have no soul, it's no big deal.
That's right.
Yeah, and the corresponding issue would be discovering that some. Well, like it used to be, you design a software well up front, and it would just run forever. And that was the corresponding situation. They're like, oh, that's a problem. So they started rushing. They found out it was much more profitable to rush code out the door. It still needs lots of fixes, and then you use the public as your beta tester.
Right.
And it also gives you a level of control over what happens in the future with that. So you can now you've got your next product coming out, so you can put some hooks into this thing that kind of help to promote and push people in the direction of the new product. So anyway, let me remind people that you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ with Dave Duncan and Nate Darnell. I want to take this moment to mention that it was the 25th anniversary of the web, dated from when Tim Berners-Lee wrote the first draft of the first proposal for what would become the World Wide Web. And at a recent talk, he called for a online Magna Carta. He said, we need a global constitution, a Bill of Rights. And his Magna Carta plan is to be taken up as part of an initiative called The Web We Want, part of which is to object to putting digital rights management hooks into web browsers so you can start making web content that behaves like proprietary software where you can't modify it or examine it and have to give over a unacceptable level of control of your system over to whatever web page wants to deliver to you. So, he calls on people to generate a digital Bill of Rights in each country, a statement of principles he hopes will be supported by public institutions, government officials, and corporations. And a little quote here. Unless we have an open, neutral internet we can rely on without worrying about what's happening at the back door, we can't have open government, good democracy, good health care, connected communities, or diversity of culture. it's not naive to think that we can have all that, but it is naive to think we can just sit back and get it. Well put, Sir Tim.
Very well put.
So I'm glad to have a chance to share that. In a similar note, I'll just note that one organization who keeps track of enemies of the internet, for the first time, the United States is on that list based on partially on how they're treating journalism and cracking down on whistleblowers. So mass surveillance methods employed in these countries, many of them exposed by NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden, are all the more intolerable because they will be used, and indeed are already being used, by authoritarian countries such as Iran, China, and Turkmenistan, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain to justify their own violations of freedom of information. So yeah, if we do it, how can we complain that anyone else does it?
It's a good question, isn't it?
Yeah. Alrighty, so now on to the general tech joy here. All sorts of good stuff. Ways to keep yourself private. One item I've seen here is a really great plugin that works with things like Google Drive and Dropbox. It's a little thing called CryptSync. And what it does is it keeps two folders in sync, and it keeps one of them encrypted. So if that one folder is the one that's being monitored by your cloud-based synchronization service, a la Google Drive or Dropbox, then effectively you're removing the problem of the government or anyone else having a backdoor into Dropbox and being able to get your stuff that way. So you're maintaining the benefit locally of just having files that are unencrypted and ready to go on your local system, but by having its sort of less evil twin encrypted be the one that's actively being visible and backed up by the other outside services, you have the best of both worlds. You're basically adding in a very universally compatible way a backdoor on the back door. So good thinking, guys. And this is actually probably something you could set up something similar with like a cron job and a script. You just monitor every time something changes and copy it, encrypt and copy it over to this other folder and vice versa. But it's nice to see that someone has rolled together a kind of ready to go version of that. Edward Snowden, more stuff on, he's had a talk at TED called Here's How We Take Back the Internet. So I'd recommend people check that out. So it's not all doom and gloom, sir. You got to have a little bit of outrage to motivate things, and then, okay, and here's what you can do about it. The tools are out there. They're just not, they're not usually convenient. So that's one of the things you can do. It's like find a tool that's hard to use and make it easier to use. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's one group of people out there, they're coming up with these wild ideas that work well enough for them. Usually an engineer will develop something that's good enough that he can use it and then stop there, because to take something that works and make it easy to use for other people, that's about 10 times the amount of work. So if you find something that already exists and is just bad to use, okay, well, that's a starting point. If you didn't have an idea for how to fix things in the first place, but you're good at design and you're good at, you have a sense of empathy and a sense of what real people can use, okay, apply it. There's a great way to be active. Well, and in another kind of shiny news, Google reveals Android Wear, an operating system for smartwatches.
That's what we're transitioning to now, right? Smart watches instead of smartphones.
Yeah, and the general category is smartwear, right? So it's it's like Google Glass, it's Bluetooth watches, it's all this kind of stuff. So let's see some of the features of this thing here. Okay, so fitness is one of the driving aspects of this. You'll be able to get real-time speed, distance, and time information. And this is one of the things that the there's in the Android, or excuse me, in the iPhone 5S, one of the things in there was an extra chip that was very low voltage and just continually monitored the accelerometer and gyroscopes and such. So that information was available for exercise apps without draining your battery. So that was useful. And this stuff is kind of following up on that. So it's like, okay, so what do you want in a watch? Well, everyone's pretty much got a phone, so you don't want something you're going to have to massively interact with. For the most part, you want kind of summary information. You want at-a-glance information, maybe, directions. That would work. What's your next direction, or, proximity to a friend or something like that. It's like beep, the Joe is within 500 feet of you.
What if it has a little holographic screen that jumps up and it's about the size of your smartphone, but then after you press the button on the wristwatch, then it automatically shrinks down again?
There you go. I would buy that. I don't know who could make it, but I would certainly buy it if it existed, and the price was right. Of course, that's always the thing, right?
Well, that's the Star Wars. That little Princess Leia.
Yeah, Princess
hologram.
Leia is help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi here.
That's right.
You're only. Oh, wait a minute, I got to go. Yeah, I ran out of time on my prepaid R2D2 card or something, hologram card. And let's see what else we got going on here. I was kind of happy to see iPhone iOS 7.1 come out, and this has been widely reviewed as the one that makes it usable. So that was a pretty slow cycle. 7 came out and it was pretty horrible.
Yeah. Do you like? I mean, I'm still on, I think, the old 6, and I kind of like it.
Well, yeah, 6 was great, and then I found out about that go to fail bug, which started on 6. So all your SSL connections are subject to man-in-the-middle attacks. But I myself am on 5 on everything. I was meaning to go to 6, and it just, about the time I was thinking about going to 6 and, doing all the backup and all the things that you need to do to kind of clear it out, and I was getting data out of my applications and all this, and by the time I got done with that, boom, 7 had come out. And I was like, no, this thing's janky. No way I'm jumping to it. Especially on the phone, where one of the problems with 7, and I guess this isn't as much of a problem as it used to be, but it's not completely solved. One of the problems with 7 was, sometimes people will send you a text message and it will never reach you, and they'll never get any alert that anything happened. And then you're going to have ticked off people in your life wondering why you're ignoring their messages. And it's like, who needs that? I mean, a phone is primarily a communication device. If it cannot do phone calls and now text messages, I'd say it fails to be a phone. It has to be able to do those two things in a reliable manner, and it has to have a battery that lasts more than 10 minutes because, that's not going to work. So that's another thing that they tend to work out on these dot releases, is they find the stuff that is using up too much power for how people really use these things, and, they make adjustments. So all sorts of new features, though. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in the background on iOS 7.1, and there are options to go in and turn those off individually now. So I think that's one of the things they added. They added some new ways to turn things off. So that's something to look at. I heard in particular, I think this was on Skype, on Android, but Skype was apparently taking up a lot of juice on something. And that was a Android bug, not a Skype bug. I mean, it sounds like it's like, oh, well, it's probably because they have your microphone turned on all the time. No, it actually, it had to do with a problem with the camera interface. So it was running voltage through the camera, even though the camera was not being accessed.
Oh, are you sure about that?
Well, it's not being communicated, it's not being stored. So, if the eye is looking at you but has no memory and does not communicate, then hasn't really seen anything. So that's a power issue. A couple of interesting things just on the... so I talked about that the whole computer security as healthcare was kind of a mind blower. Here's another one that I will go to. Reason as a mimetic immune disorder. This came from the observation that a lot of times, say, with a religion or other, religion's a good one to start with. It's very easy for people to get kind of extreme about it. And the observation was people that came to a religion late in life tended to have a higher risk of turning into a real zealot. So it's like, well, what's up with that? Someone grows up in a religion, they don't tend to be as extreme about their religion as someone who comes to it late. They don't tend to take everything literally, like, you should stone anyone who eats fish or something like that. It's like, yeah, whatever. So why is that? And here's some more observations about that. A lot of rules in the Bible are impossible, illegal, or embarrassing to follow nowadays, like wearing tassels, tying your money to yourself, stoning adulterers, not eating fruit from a tree less than 5 years old, etc. And this didn't seem to bother more than a handful of the 1/3 to 1/2 of Americans who claim the Bible is the Word of God. So why is that? But okay, so here was the heart of this piece I was looking at. The reason he wrote this article was that intelligent people sometimes do things more stupid than stupid people are capable of.
Wow. I think that's true.
There are a variety of reasons for this, but one has to do with the fact that all cultures have dangerous memes circulating in them and cultural antibodies to these memes. The trouble is, these antibodies are not logical. On the contrary, these antibodies are often highly illogical. They are the blind spots that let us live with dangerous memes without being impelled to action by them. The dangerous effects of these memes are most obvious with religion, but I think there's an element, and he's saying he thinks there's an element of this in many social norms. We have a powerful cultural norm in America that says all people are equal, whatever that means. Originally, this powerful and ambiguous belief was counterbalanced by a set of blind spots so large that this belief did not even impel us to free slaves or let women or non-property owners vote. We have another cultural norm that says that hard work reliably and exclusively leads to success, and another set of blind spots that prevent this belief from turning us all into objectivists. So anyway, a little reason can be a dangerous thing. So the vaccines. How can you tell when you've removed one set of blind spots from your reasoning without removing its counterbalances? One heuristic to counter this loss of immunity. Is to be very careful when you find yourself deviating from everyone around you. We deviate from those around us all the time, so it's not necessarily a completely useful heuristic, but it's a place to start. But another heuristic is to listen to your feelings. If your conclusions seem repulsive to you, you may have stripped yourself of cognitive immunity to something dangerous. I'll let that sit for just a second, because I was like, wow, this explains a lot. This is how you have mad scientists go off in some wild eugenics direction, or other bits of mad science where people have pursued directions that were harmful to pretty much all of humanity and themselves, because they got lost in the science. So that's something to consider. Smart people are capable of doing extremely dumb things because they have often they've broached some new territory. They've gotten away from what everyone's doing, and that's one of the counterbalancing forces. So, I wonder from time to time why, as a people, as a race, we don't tend to, all of humanity, why we don't get smarter and wiser over time. And it doesn't, in a lot of ways, we're kind of walking that one backwards. So I think this is yet another one of those little factors that shines a little light on that. And you get too smart, you start to do really stupid things.
Well, I think there's truth in that. I think in order for the subsequent generations to become more intelligent, they have to actually learn from the lessons of the previous generations. And I think we've reached a time in the history of humanity where it's become very challenging to pass on to the next generation knowledge and or applicable knowledge and morality. It seems to me like there are so many distractions and so many agendas from non-human entities, like corporations, that really have a greater interest in simply a profit-driven motivation than in long-term community health.
Right. Well, and in this context also, you could see becoming part of a corporation as a kind of disease. Right? It's taking you away from some of your cultural antibodies to bad behavior.
Right.
And letting you do things that are long-term really, really stupid because they make sense short-term within the logical construct, this artificial construct you've made.
Well, and I want to be clear just about the corporate entity as well, because the entity isn't bad in and of itself. It's how it's utilized. And it's just my opinion that if a corporation is formed without the concept of the health of human beings or the profit of human beings being at the
center,
the center, basically it has to leverage human beings in order to be profitable.
Yeah, it's like, why do, if you take a step back and say, like, wait a minute, why are we doing something that doesn't actually help anybody just to be consistent with our system?
Right.
Yeah.
So I believe that corporations can be run very effectively, but I do not believe that they should be the equivalent of human beings. I think that opens up a whole new realm of discussion and liability issues and potential abuses and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. All right, sir. Well, we're at that time here, but I will throw in one more timely bit of news locally, and it's a little bit sad, but it's not over. But a kind of a downer milestone for DIY Studio. They are closing the Creative Reuse brick and mortar store over next to Reed Opera House. So March 22nd is the last day they're going to have their doors open, and they're going to close at their normal time of 6 p.m. I don't think they have any big thing planned, but people were, kind of looting the store at a fairly rapid rate when I visited last week, picking over things as they kind of clear them out. So they will go back to their previous mode as a kind of disembodied organization that occasionally holds, or regularly, I should say, holds little craft events over at the library and other locations. So just, they found, well, okay, their rent's doubling, and, they would have whole days go by where maybe, they sold $5 worth of stuff. So it just, and they tried to do a Kickstarter campaign, didn't quite make their goal. So, and with Kickstarter, if you don't make your goal, you don't get anything. It was interesting. They said there is some support out there that, like when they threw their trash show, making use of recyclable goods in a fashion show, they got like a grant for one event that they were really meaning to get for a year,
All right.
So they had some money poured on them for that. But,
so just out of curiosity, does Kickstarter keep all that if they don't make their...
No, it's just a pledge.
Okay. It's
just a pledge. So it doesn't actually kick in until you've reached that threshold, and then everyone gets billed, I think, is how it works.
Got it.
But I'm not 100% sure. I probably should research that, because we talk about Kickstarter quite a bit. I've actually participated in one, and kind of, well, at this moment, I've lost everything I put into it, and I didn't get my gift because, they said for this pledge level, you get this, and then in the text of the thing it says, oh, and there's this much for shipping, and I'm like, okay, well, was that included or not? And I'm like, why are they, when I click on something to donate, why is it not giving the amount that you actually need to get that thing? But anyway, they didn't include it, but they did send a follow-up message saying they had an option for people after the Kickstarter closed to send them the shipping, and then you can get what you ordered. So that was cast AR glasses that I was looking at for that. But anyway, yeah, so DIY Studio is continuing in a sense of having really great people involved with it, and they definitely have a following. And people definitely turned out when, they said it was closing. So I think a lot of people, I heard this over and over again. It's like, oh yeah, I always meant to get down there. So people like the idea. It wasn't around long enough for it to be integrated into people's lives. And I think that's a chronic thing with interesting businesses in Salem. I'm not sure what it takes to cross that threshold.
Well, I think the challenge in that model is, how do you make it a revenue-driven model so that you can pay rent?
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, you've done it again. You spent another hour, mind-twisting hour, thinking about technology and how it affects us and how we affect it, hopefully, so that it affects us better. So I hope you tune in next Wednesday and every Wednesday at noon for Northwest Tech Show.